Well, Seiko, welcome to Let's Talk with John Kane and Regan DeLoggins. I got to tell you, you guys have no idea why I'm laughing, but we are so scrambling right here to try to get a show up and connected. We're, like I said last week, we're always trying to work on better connectivity. And today, everything failed. So I finally had to resort to just being a phone call. So all of our apps that we're trying to use, all that other stuff, nothing seems to be working right. But this is working. So, Regan, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. And Reggie, just to say hi, can you hear us all?
Hello, everyone. And yes, I can hear you both.
Okay. Well, hopefully.
Excellent. So far, we're doing great.
Yeah, hopefully the audio holds out. This is, again, I'm like pulling my hair out. And I'm on video, so when I pull my hair out, it looks worse than when you guys do. All right. Okay, we're still trying to work on this social distancing and remote broadcasting, and because what we're trying to do here, we will not be doing phone calls today. Here's the deal: our studio engineers, from WBAI, are desperately trying to work out ways that they can serve this station from home. So not just us producers, but even the studio engineers are trying to work on this thing, and as a result, Reggie, I assume you're doing this from home right now.
Well, since you let the cat out of the bag, yeah, I am.
Well, wait, everybody's been bragging about doing it from home, so all right, I let the cat out of the bag. No,
jokes aside, it's that I'm not trying to make it about myself. It's just. The important thing is about to maintain whatever narrative that producers like yourselves have. And, so as much as I'm heard on the air, I try to make myself, it's not about me. Well, quoting a former presidential candidate, it's not me, it's us.
Well, okay, but at this point, the only us that was riding a subway or a bus to go to the WBAI studios has been you guys have been right. who have been manning the board there. So you guys deserve to be as safe as the rest of us. The rest of us who are either connecting by phone, computer, or whatever. So I appreciate the effort.
Your support.
Well, and we just and we're going to continue to work on this. So again, my apologies to the frantic start. You guys who are listening to the radio show or catching us streaming online have no idea just how close to the wire we came to, at least for me. I mean, look, it would have been fine if Regan did the show without me because I was here just beating my head against the wall. But luckily, we can both do this today. All right. Well, a couple of things.
And we have things to discuss.
Well, yes, we do. And, and you and I went back and forth a little bit, and we have some very specific things that are native related to talk about. But I also wonder, look, and this, frankly, is for both you and Reggie, I guess. Is the level of frustration that so many red states are showing and demonstrating about this, self-quarantining and, staying at home, is it starting to really eat at the folks in New York City as well? Or are the people there still handling things in stride pretty well?
My experience has been that the past week, maybe almost 2 weeks actually, New Yorkers have become extremely frustrated with being in quarantine and social distancing, and it actually has become more stressful than it was at the beginning because now the weather is nice and therefore people feel like that may be an excuse to go outside and to ride their city bikes without masks and to do their runs without masks. And so honestly, it's actually been, for me, more stressful the past week to 2 weeks.
To follow up what you're saying, Regan, I've seen the same thing. There's definitely a level of angstiness. I don't know if that's a word, but work with me on that one.
I love it.
Yeah, and there is an utter frustration. And just to follow up what you're saying is that, yeah, I mean, I want to enjoy the warm weather just like everyone else, but we have to come to grips over the fact that this is not normal. I mean, I know, and I totally agree with you, the both of you, when you said that we should not acknowledge this and accept this that we're experiencing right now as the new normal, because the old normal wasn't great from the start. So this right here, if we're calling this the new normal, no, we need to change this up. This should be somewhere of, I don't know if there is a societal equivalent to purgatory, but but that may be more similar to that than calling this the new normal. And I understand the frustration, but the thing is, we got to learn from history, and history has shown us that if we rest on our laurels, the second wave is going to be fierce. I mean,
yeah.
and maybe a third wave as well too is very possible, because we can all see the possibilities of what level of disaster that will be. Because let's be real, by the time October comes around, by the time November comes around, we're going to hear cases that's going to go up again, and then people are going to understand. They're going to shrug their shoulders and say, "Why? Why?" I mean, do the proper procedures. I mean, adhere to those precautions. Do the social distancing the way it was supposed to be done. And I get why, if you need to go outside for a walk, go outside for a walk. But
well, and here's the frustrating. Here's one of the frustrating parts is, we keep talking about a second wave. This wave isn't even over yet. I mean, look, to the extent that some numbers have flattened out, I mean, the overall numbers, I don't know what the percentage is right now because I don't have it right in front of me like I normally do. But, the percentage of people who've been tested, even in New York City, is still only about, 6 or 7%. So it's not like we know how many people basically even have had it or may still have it. They're still only testing people who are, for the most part, who are very sick, although that's starting to open up a little bit. But we're a far cry away from understanding where this spread is, or in determining that the spread is somehow maxed out. It's not even close to any of that stuff. So, but I hear what you're saying, Reggie, and I think we do have to understand that whatever we're going through right now is not normal, and it is not a new normal, and we're not striving to get to the old normal. What we're really trying to face here is that we are in a place now where we don't understand all of the effects of this disease. We don't even understand how to deal with it politically, socially, and all this other stuff. We're all fumbling around trying to get through this, and we're I mean, the problems that get elevated are things that seem to be far less necessary. And of course, I did a whole show talking about how much church, and I don't mean just church, group worship has played such a high role in, a big role in how this thing has spread. We've talked about Navajo territory. That whole epidemic in Navajo territory started with a gathering, not just a church service, but a gathering where people, religious leaders from all over, and Christian religious leaders from all over Navajo territory came to one place in the first week in March, and then took it to all other places in Navajo territory. New York's first hotspot was based on one individual infecting a synagogue and a couple of, not only a service, but then a ceremony after that. And it spread, throughout New Rochelle and other places. South Korea, same thing. They got hit in a big way because of church, because of the spread through church. And today, now everybody's wrestling with this. We're going to allow up to 10 people gather for group worship, and I don't even know what the hell that's supposed to mean. But so, I mean, I look at how much we're prioritizing the things that are not necessary in staying alive or protecting our loved ones. We're putting a higher priority on whether a mask is fashionable or whether it's comfortable enough and that kind of stuff, instead of really putting a higher priority on what we need to do to see where we end up as this thing continues to play out, because I don't know that it's going to pass. I mean, we're going to have to figure that out as we go. We don't know if there's herd immunity or if a vaccine's going to work. You know, if there's any hope of coming up with any kind of viral medication, antiviral, you know, that can help. So we don't. So in the meantime, we're all trying to figure out and do things the best we can. So, and I guess, you know, we had Shawnee on last week, and we know what northern the North Country is like, and there's a lot of redneck sentiment out there. Well, I live in West, or the Native Territory that I'm on is in the Western New York region, and I got to tell you that, you know, we've got a whole lot of right wingers that are, you know, protesting every day without masks and that kind of stuff. And I don't know I don't think they represent the majority. My biggest question was, how much is some of that sentiment really starting to perk up in the New York City area?
I think that what's really important to know is that this is not, you know, we keep saying the new normal or the normal, or we hated the old normal. And I think that what's really important to know is that COVID-19 exacerbates and it intensifies the social injustice issues that have always been underlying causes to inequity. That this is, you know, for example, the NYPD is, you know, a racist organization that participates in unjustified violence against Black communities, and has been doing that since its insemination. And just last week, we saw over 8 cases of police brutality in which Black families, Black men, Black women, and Black trans and gender nonconforming folks are subjugated to continued police violence within their neighborhoods, while white people at parks are passed out mass.
Well, and more importantly, they're being violated over things like violating these stay at home, these social distancing, the mask issues. So you're right. So rather than COVID-19 letting everybody take a pause on some of this other animosity that exists, it just ends up being another reason to highlight the fact that these things exist, the racial bias exists, and that kind of stuff. Because I guarantee that if a white person is jogging on, down through Manhattan without a mask on, he isn't going to get beat up by the cops.
Of course not. Of course not. A cop will probably offer that jogger a mask, or just let them be on their way. So I think that is just an important thing to note, is that the things that have existed previously in our quote unquote old normal still exist contemporarily, currently, in this moment. Nothing has changed. It's just intensified. Communities of color are still struggling to get access to regular basic things. Our healthcare workers are still struggling to get access to regular basic things. Like, these aren't new things. These aren't new issues. They're just intensified. We still see the wealthy maintaining their wealth. We still see people of color at the detriment of a racially biased justice system. Like, none of this is new. It's just intensified. And I think that's just very important to know. I mean, for example, what's happening in Indian country. We as Native folks who live on our territories don't have access to excellent health care. And a lot of the quote unquote underlying medical issues that exacerbate COVID-19, like diabetes and heart issues, are because of ongoing colonization and lack of health care because of racism. And that hasn't changed. It's just intensified. And we see COVID-19 just really rearing its ugly head and bringing to the forefront issues that a lot of folks didn't even consider.
Well, and that's a good segue to what we're going to really spend a good portion of the show talking about. Most people don't understand this, and frankly, I know folks who in New York City are not familiar with the tensions that exist between Native territories, Native peoples, and that includes Native governments, but the grassroots people on Native territories, the tensions that exist between them and the states, and the federal government for that matter. And so when you look at what's transpired, and then you look at, as you were mentioning, how vulnerable our territories are because of underlying conditions that have been caused by, that have been policy driven and that kind of thing. You look at what's transpiring now in Navajo territory. More and more Native territories said, look, we want to know who's coming on and going through our territories. And so in many places, on the U.S. and on the Canadian side, there have been, whether it was through their tribal police or some sort of government function or at a grassroots level, there have been people who have taken to the inlets and the outlets of highways and roads that are coming onto Native territory to at least do a checkpoint. And I'm not talking about roadblock. Nobody's putting Constantine wire across the road or bulldozing anything. They just want to know, why are you coming on? Where do you live? Where are you coming from? Why are you coming on? Do you have a temperature? Or a fever? Do you have any symptoms? And they just want to know, because our territories are so vulnerable, and increasingly, agitated voices have come from provincial levels and state levels, and of course the one that people are most familiar with is what's transpiring in South Dakota. There, the governor of South Dakota, Kristi Noem, is basically saying Native territories cannot do checkpoints and screen people coming through the territory. I mean, she literally tried to say they can't do it. And see, and I guess my point is, most people don't know that tension even exists, and that we're in a constant battle with states on what we can do on our own lands. By and large, most Americans think that Native people, we govern our territories, and that we have the right to do certain things on our territories, and that notwithstanding whatever the state's opinion is. But there's an area, because of state and federal laws, that leaves a lot of that, maybe not a question mark for Native people, but for the states. So when you got the governor of South Dakota basically giving an ultimatum, saying you break up these checkpoints or else, and she started threatening to bring in the National Guard. Now she's been making overtures to Donald Trump. Of course, she's a Republican, but she's been making overtures to Donald Trump about trying to do something to Native people who are merely trying to screen people who are passing through or coming to or passing through their territories. And this is, to me, just the height of absurdity, especially now. I mean, you would think, yeah, why wouldn't you want to encourage people to take measures that would protect their own people?
I think that I'm just going to rewind a little bit and provide our listeners with a little bit of background, just in case they are unaware of what's happening. But earlier this month, the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and the Oglala Sioux Tribe set up highway stops that led into the territory. And as John just said, they weren't blocking the road, but they're asking questions like, have you shown symptoms? Where are you going? How long are you planning being there? Honestly, regular questions. And as John said, Noem then earlier this month, after the highway stops went up, threatened to sue the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe and the Oglala Sioux Tribe if they did not remove the highway stops within 48 hours. However, she then backed away from this plan, offering to negotiate the issue with both tribes. Both tribes agreed to have this discussion, this negotiation conversation. But rather than actually having that conversation, Noem then went to the Department of the Interior and wrote a letter to Donald Trump, which is published on ABC News. You can see the whole letter, in which she is quoted in saying that this is not about tribal sovereignty, which is not true, and that there needs to be federal reaction to both Sioux tribes in order to remove these highway stops.
Well, and let's be clear. The whole premise for the states trying to prohibit this is, again, dollars and cents. They say it's impacting them commercially. And in fact, they'll even cite statutes that talk about violating interstate commerce and these kinds of things. So it always comes down to a dollars and cents thing. So when you hear Regan and I just railing against capitalism, it's like this is another example of where the federal government in or the state governments try to put a higher priority on their economic needs than on the safety of people.
And the Oglala Sioux Tribe chairman speaker made a statement in which he said that this is just for prevention. They've only had a couple of positive cases on both tribal lands, and that they must act in prevention because they don't have the adequate support from the federal government if COVID does wreak havoc within the tribes, as we see what's happening on Navajo Nation, which now everyone is, the federal government is scrambling to provide support, which of course will not be seen. And rather than having to wait for that kind of support, both tribes are acting within their own sovereign right. We also need to clarify this is a sovereign right. They have a right to do this. These checkpoints are not unlawful. And this is to prevent what could be incredibly detrimental to Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. It blows my mind that businesses are allowed to exercise this right of turning people away if they show signs.
An airport or anything else can do it. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, they're allowed to. There's signs all over Brooklyn that say if you don't have a mask, we are allowed to refuse service. If you are showing symptoms, we're allowed to refuse service. If you don't abide by our rules, we are allowed to refuse service. But the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe are not even allowed to have highway stops for the same reason. And the thing is that this is the time. This is the time to do it.
Capitalism.
This is the time to do it before you have, you look at what's transpiring in Navajo territory. I mean, they're trying to put smoke in the bottle. They're trying to contain a spread that is out there. 12 states have fewer cases. 12 of the United States have fewer cases than the Navajo territory does. I mean, they have the highest rate of infection. Than even higher than New York. I'm higher than any other place in the United States. And so for any native territory, and there are others that are doing it, both on the U.S. and on the Canadian side. There are many territories where the people have set up checkpoints to try to screen people coming on because they don't want unnecessary travel. I mean, look, some territories, they have economies that count on the outside, and so they may not do it at the same level where most of the businesses may already be shut down, so there's no reason for the traffic to come through. So, look, sometimes they can prevent somebody from making an unnecessary trip, saying, no, there's no reason to come here. Our bingo hall was shut down, our casino was shut down, so go on your way,
Yes, and I need the listeners to understand that Oglala Sioux and Cheyenne River Sioux are within their right of doing this. This is not unlawful in any way, shape, or form, but rather a practice of sovereignty. And for NOAM to even send these affidavits to the BIA, to the Interior, to the President of the United States is just such. It just really reflects on the ignorance of. There's a lack of education within our systems. People don't understand what tribes are allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. Unfortunately, there are a lot of things we're not allowed to do.
But even that,
this is something we are allowed to do.
Even that, I think there's a lot of things that the state tries to impose on native territories that is absolutely unlawful authority that they try to wield. And we're going to take a break here. We're almost at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to get into that because I want to talk about the history of states trying to interfere with native territories, because even the solution, even when we get a court ruling or a piece of legislation that somehow tries to contain state authority, there's usually a downside to it. So I want to take a bigger look at this, and we're going to bring it a little bit local here. We're going to talk about what transpired with Shinnecock territory and other places. But we'll do that. We'll take a break here, and we'll come right back, and we'll get right into that. So Reggie, go ahead and light some music up, and we'll be back in a minute. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins. Hey, before we get back into it, and we do have a bunch of things, I want to continue this conversation, but I do need to remind people. One of the reasons that we're on at 4 o'clock is because we are in Fund Drive, and so they've trimmed us back from a 2-hour show to a 1-hour show, and while we're in fund drive mode. So I do want to remind people to go to the pledge line. Go to I got to remember my numbers here. Make it.
That's all right. That's why I'm here. 516-620-3602.
All right, there we go.
It's the number to call. Yeah, there it is. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So go to the pledge line again, 516-620-3602. Go to the website, which is give2wbai.org. Make a donation to the station. Do it in the name of the show. I mean, and I ask you to do it in the name of the show because, look, I know if you listen to WBAI all day long, you can find some great premiums and perhaps some gifts you'd like to receive, but. One of the things that by making a donation in the name of a show, you send a clear signal that it isn't a product that you're making a donation for. You're doing a donation for the content that you're hearing. And I think it's important that you as the listener, when you make a donation, look, I'm not saying don't sign up for a premium, but for shows like ours, I want to make sure that when people make a donation and become a WBAI buddy, that they're doing it because of what the product that we're delivering, which is the show. As we used to say, the premium is the program. So again, make a donation and support WBAI. Make a donation and support Let's Talk. And look, that way you'll keep Regan and I coming back to you every week. All right. So we were talking about. And you actually made me cringe a little bit when you talked about the things we're allowed to do and the things that we're not allowed to do, because that is oftentimes the state or the federal government that tries to say what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. And I'm going to go all the way back to 1988. Look, we had established gaming, and I want to be clear, I'm not an advocate for native gaming. I'll defend native people doing what, again, exercising their right to do whatever commerce their people see fit. But in the 80s, we were doing gambling. We had bingo halls, high stake bingo halls. There was even some that were dabbling a little bit with casino gaming. The state of California tried to shut down an operation on the Cabazon territory, and this case, and they tried to use the courts. And they took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cabazon. They basically said that if the state has gaming, the native people can have gaming. Now, that is a win, although on some levels, it still said, well, native territories can only do gaming if the state allows gaming for themselves, which is still not recognizing the sovereignty. But at any rate, so the state was trying to shut down a bingo hall operation on a native territory. And now, again, I know there's a lot of people who had no idea that states are back in 1988 or still today in places like South Dakota are still trying to wield authority that they either don't have or they're assuming they have based on state laws that or even federal laws that we were never a party to. But in the case of 1988, in the California versus the Cabazon win, and they go on to do gaming, and all of a sudden the federal government realizes, wait a minute, we just opened up the door for casino gaming. So they scrambled to put together a piece of legislation called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act that would empower the states to play a role in our gaming. So even when we are right, and then I want to be clear, when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cabazons, they didn't give us the right to do gaming. They didn't award us something. They just basically told the states they do have the right. They had the right before, and they have the right now, and they have the right going in the future. And so when they passed IGRA, they actually put a federal statute in place to try to trim back some of that autonomy, that sovereignty, and then place some of it in the hands of the state. And it's still problematic to this day. We have all kinds of problems. Look, we're fighting the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, over gaming and over their violation of the very federal statute that has been put in place that nobody seems to want to enforce. So there's that. But it doesn't stop with things like gaming. I got to bring up what my friends out in Shinnecock have been going through. The Shinnecock sit there with this huge amount of white wealth looming over their shoulders on their ancestral lands. So you have the Hamptons. You have all of these privileged white people, primarily white people, who travel out to the Sunrise Highway to go, they leave their 8-figure, 6-figure, 7-figure incomes in New York and go out to celebrate in the Hamptons. And they drive, almost can ignore the small group of Shinnecock that still hold on to just a postage stamp size piece of their original homeland. And they drive through there to go to their mansions. Now, the Shinnecock have been trying to eke out an economy. They have smoke shops, and they've been trying to pursue land claim negotiation and even through federal recognition, trying to reclaim land. They have hopes that they can create gaming revenue so they can finally have the resources to do the things that they need to do. And I'll tell you, the likelihood of them ever reaching the level of affluence of their white neighbors who look down upon them, it will take. It'll take a very long time for that to ever happen. So in the meantime, they decide, well, look, the highway goes right through our territory. Let's at least put up they call it a monument. We're going to put up a monument that lets people know you are driving through Shinnecock territory. Even as you're heading out to your wealthy mansions in the Hamptons, we're going to let you know that you are passing through Shinnecock territory. And a part of that monument, they turned it into essentially an electronic billboard. So these white people started losing their minds. They started losing their minds, using whatever they could to try to shut these things. I mean, they're already built, and they were trying to get them removed. And so we get into these situations that they use the courts. Now, we rarely use the courts. We oftentimes find ourselves in the courts defending ourselves, and the courts are kind of a strange place for us to be. For one thing, there's two things that the courts have to consider first off, right out of the gate. One is, do the people who are entering this court, do they have standing to even be in this court? The crazy part is Native people had no legal standing to ever use the court systems for them to resolve any conflicts. I mean, for years and years, land claims, a Native entity, a Native person, a tribe could not go into court because the courts had never established, as far as they were concerned, that Native people had legal standing in their system. That's problematic on a couple of different levels, but it's also revealing because on one hand, they're saying you don't have standing to be in these courts, and by doing so are saying we recognize that you are a distinct people. And that is why, I mean, they won't say that, but by making the claim that we don't have standing in the courts, it's obvious that they're recognizing our distinction. So for many, many, many years, Native people could never bring a lawsuit into federal or state court. So when we finally do get, have the standing, the second question comes in: does the state, or does a county, a state, or a federal court have jurisdiction? One of the first things that we always say as Native people is, no, you don't. But if we're talking about something on our territories, you don't have jurisdiction. So when a court takes a case where we're fighting, the state or a municipality or the federal government, whatever level that court takes that case, the first thing that they do automatically is say, yes, we have the power to rule over this, which is problematic all by itself. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that something that non-natives don't understand is that there's a difference between sovereignty and self-determination. And within federal law, Native nations are allowed to practice sovereignty under the federal law, which means that according to federal law, we are still subjects, quote unquote, on our own land.
Yeah.
Does that mean that we can't? Does that mean that we can't exercise self-determination on our land? No, not at all.
Well,
but there is a problem in which the federal government uses. Hold on. Let me finish. Right. It's just important to know. It's just important to know because a lot of people don't know this. It's the same. It's the same conversation we had last week in relation to MMIW G2ST, which is that when non-natives perpetrate violence on reservation land, we cannot hold them accountable, but rather the FBI is supposed to, and they rarely do. It's that same back and forth, which is that there isn't a clarification on what sovereignty actually looks like, and that we do and will continue to practice self-determination under this bastardized version of sovereignty.
Well, and here's the problem with all of that, and I don't completely agree with you on how this was characterized, and here's the reason why. The federal government clearly has an issue with recognizing any notion of sovereignty. I mean, and to the extent that they advocate self-determination, and look, when you look at the 5 policies of the native policies of the United States, self-determination is the last one they added. It started out with extermination, then removal and assimilation, and then termination, and now it's self-determination. But the federal government makes it very clear when they say self-determination, they don't mean the international definition of self-determination. They object strongly to the notion that Native peoples have the right to assert sovereignty over their lands, or over their own people. And so, I mean, even the example you talked about with MMIW is, for the federal government to say that they won't allow a U.S. citizen to be subject to a non-U.S. jurisdiction, and that's why many territories, or why we can't prosecute white people for committing crimes against Native people on our lands, and that's problematic. But
of course it is. I think you and I are saying the same thing.
I know, but when you say most people don't know this, the problem is that this isn't a well-established legal fact or a legal principle. The fact that the federal government tries to assert sovereignty or assert its jurisdiction over Native territories, I think it's done wrongfully. I think it's done illegally. So to say it as to say it as if there's self-determination that we have the right to do, and there's sovereignty that we don't have the right to do, it puts those definitions in boxes that the federal government tries to manipulate. So, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, of course, that's the issue.
But in this situation,
we are saying the exact same thing.
But in situations like trying to do a checkpoint on protecting your territory, I mean, it's absurd to see the position that the governor of South Dakota has taken. To see what the Shinnecock experienced just because they put a sign up on their territory, and to have white people say, "Oh, we don't like it because we have to drive by that." And, the fact that they have unfettered access to cross Shinnecock territory isn't enough for them. They want to make sure that their view is not. They don't have to soil their view by acknowledging that they're on Shinnecock land. And see, this is where the court issue becomes so difficult, because we have courts that, again, for over a century battled whether we even had legal standing to be in their courts, and then that fight to enter those courts creates another problem, because once you do enter that court, you're somehow you've placed yourself in their jurisdiction. And this whole idea of jurisdiction is something that the federal government has battled with. Look, in the U.S. Constitution, in its original form, they recognize that we were not a part of the United States. They flat out said that they didn't apportion congressional representation. They couldn't apportion taxes to us. In fact, they referred to us in the Constitution as Indians not taxed, that we were not counted amongst their population or under their constitution. When they try to resolve the conflicts after the Civil War, and they say anybody born in the United States and under U.S. jurisdiction is a United States citizen, which was supposed to resolve the slavery issue, didn't really address us, because there was that question about whether we were under jurisdiction. They knew that we weren't when they passed the 14th Amendment. So then when we get into 1924, where they try to declare that we're U.S. citizens, they put a caveat there. They say nothing in this statute, nothing in this law will deprive Native people of their rights. Well, if you're going to try to impose U.S. citizenship on us, then you've challenged some of our rights, and it goes through U.S. history. So now, as we sit here today, and part of the reason I'm even bringing this up is when I saw the posting, because let me be clear, the Shinnecocks won in court. The white people trying to take down their signs lost, but even when I saw how it was posted on Facebook. And the person who posted up said, the courts have ruled, and they say we can keep our sign. And it's like, no, that's not what we shouldn't have accepted that ruling if that's the way it was really worded. What they should have said, no, the courts have ruled against the white people trying to stop us. And because I don't want the courts having the authority to determine whether we have permission from the courts to do gaming or to do a sign or to do a checkpoint. This is the problem that exists. But again, there's a difference. It isn't just semantics. When we talk about the difference between whether it's the court systems at the state or the federal, or whether level, or whether it's legislatures at the state or the federal level, the fact that they refuse to acknowledge that we have rights and responsibilities that supersede their authority. See, they still always want to maintain that whatever rights we have because they gave it to us or because they give it to us. And this is what is so problematic with the language and how we end up defending ourselves in courts. The bottom line is a court can only rule on issues that they somehow claim to have jurisdiction over. Well, what point did Native people ever yield that sovereignty to not only to the executives but to the legislature and to the judicial system? If you don't have a transfer of sovereignty to the federal government or to state government, then how do we ever say that exists today? And this is where the problem is. So when I look at the Shinnecogs battling over a sign, it's not any different than the Lakota battling over trying to protect their community. And yet this is we go through this battle constantly, and we've been going through it for decades. I mean, this has been at its foundation the problems that we have with Native, our rights to take care of our people and to create economies, to do any number of things on our territories, and the power of the state or the federal government to try to create. I mean, look, one of the Supreme Court rulings says that Congress has the power to regulate the metes and bounds of tribal sovereignty. That's legal dicta out of one of these cases, and even Clarence Thomas, who I'm not a big fan of, said, I don't see any place in any law that can hold up to this, to constitutionality or in the Constitution itself that ever gave the federal government. One of the things that they claim that gives in the original U.S. Constitution, they said the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause that says Congress has the power to regulate commerce in and amongst several states, with foreign nations, and with tribes. Not of tribes, with tribes. And those aren't words I like to use, but that's how it's written in the U.S. Constitution. But see, this is where... Go ahead.
I was going to say that I think that it's important for us to rewind and provide context, which was that back in August of 2019, the Shinnecock Nation did put up this sign. And the reason that it caused such an uproar was because what it said, which is genius, by the way, I totally loved it, was it has this white man, and he's like drinking like a wine, or maybe it's a beer, with a lighthouse in the background. And it says, "Relax and enjoy your stolen land." And it was fantastic. It was fantastic. But of course it frustrated the people who are non-natives who drive through it, because it's a reminder. It's a huge reminder that this place of affluence and wealth is in fact stolen land. I mean, I think people don't understand that, and it drives me nuts, is that this is just a billboard reminding people that the land they are on was taken from Indigenous people. And the folks driving through, the non-Indigenous folks driving through, were so frustrated by that reminder that they felt that they had to take Shinnecock Nation to court. And of course, Shinnecock Nation won. It's within their right. And it's a billboard. It's an electronic billboard.
Well, and again, because I don't want the context to be totally lost here. The message you're talking about was one of several. It's an electronic billboard, so the message changes, and that was one of the messages. They also provided all kinds of public service announcements on this thing. And as this COVID-19 thing, developed, they were providing a lot of good information that was valuable to everybody. So this electronic billboard was not just taking shots at white people. people. I mean, but frankly, the biggest shot, thing that the white folks were complaining about was just the idea of an electronic billboard. They thought, oh, the lights and it's causing light pollution at night, and it's not consistent with the natural surroundings, that like somehow their mansions didn't somehow violate the natural surroundings. But you're right, they did use these signs to deliver some of these potent messages. But for the most part, they were it was paid advertisement, and it was providing free public service announcements. That's what these signs were doing.
And it's important to know also that Bloomberg, during his failed run for presidency, used harmful stereotypes about the Shinnecock in order to discuss how he was going to provide support to the Shinnecock, in which he was saying that he had land in Shinnecock Hills and that he's seen the reservation and it's filled with poverty and alcoholism. You can look it up. It was said, he said it. And Shinnecock Nation pushed back and said, you've never been to our reservation. You're welcome to come, and you will see that it is not that. And so even within the national narrative of what indigenous sovereignty or self-determination looks like, it's based in harmful stereotypes that we
absolutely
are incapable of taking care of ourselves, that we're just plagued with all of these horrible things like alcoholism and poverty. And yes, those are issues in our community, but they're also issues in other communities.
And those are issues that were placed in our community.
Frustrating to see it.
But people have to realize that we don't make alcohol on our territories. I mean, this is stuff that has been. I mean, look, they used to requisition wagon loads of gin and rum for treaty negotiations.
Yeah.
Alcoholism on our territories and the poverty in our territories, these are policy-driven conditions that are on our territories. And, so I think when I hear, some wealthy white man like Bloomberg suggesting that our territories are rife with alcoholism, it's again, I'm reminded on how the narrative over heroin changed over the last several years. Because as long as you had cocaine and alcohol and other harmful substance abuses limited, and you could cast yourself as white people above what people of color were experiencing. But once heroin started affecting in a negative way white families, all of a sudden the whole narrative, we need treatment now, we don't need punishment, we need treatment. And yet we still have folks like Bloomberg and others that will look at a native territory or they'll look at a black community and automatically make assumptions that somehow our lifestyles are driven by our character and not by the policies that the United States and states have created.
And also that we would want the help from white people. Bloomberg was like, I plan on helping the Shinnecock Nation. What? We don't want your help. I'm not Shinnecock. I can't speak for Shinnecock, so I don't ever want to conflate the two. But I found it I just found it insane to know that these are issues that are systemic, caused by colonizer public policy, and then to think that a colonizer could come in and rectify that. Like, no, y'all have meddled enough. Go away.
Yeah, I mean, and the bottom line is, when we talk about sovereignty and we talk about self-determination, the biggest thing that we need to do and assert and fight for is our right to fix our own problems. And that's why, at some level when and even
start wrapping it up, guys. Even
when Hallen and Sharice David, become congresswomen, the whole idea that somehow we're going to be saved by people in the federal government, Native people in the federal government, because legislation is what we need to fix us. And, that's why I'm always somewhat suspect, so to speak. All right, hey, we do have to wrap it up.
Settler politics have. My last statement is that settler politics were never created to serve us.
Right.
That's it.
That's it. All right, we do have to wrap it up. This is John Kane with Regan DeLoggins. This is Let's Talk. We'll be back next week, I'm assuming. We're going to check out now. You'll get a news brief. And I want to remind people, make a donation in the name of Let's Talk to WBAI. Go to our pledge line. Go to 516-620-3602. Go to the website, give to WBAI.org. Thanks.